If you haven't been living under a rock for the last few months, it should come as no big surprise that Red Bull were given a penalty for breaching the budget cap. And that said penalty was pretty underwhelming. But maybe, now that Red Bull has won both championships, the penalty could start doing some serious damage to the team's performance. And maybe we could see other teams back on top in 2023. So, let's not waste any more time and get right into the focus of this video. Make sure to stick around until the end because what Christian Horner announced will absolutely shock you. It almost seems like it was yesterday the FIA announced that Red Bull went over budget during the 2021 Formula 1 season, which made a lot of fans angry, and blaming them isn't right. After all, the season ended with the first two drivers only 3 points away, meaning that every cent spent in the car development counted, and in the end, the driver who won was also found over budget. So that wasn't really fair for Mercedes fans or F1 fans in general. We all just want fair racing following the rules, nothing more. But then insult was added to the injury, and the FIA rules out a penalty for the Austrian team that was ridiculously small, a 10% reduction in wind tunnel time during development for the 2023 car, and a $7 million fine. Of course, everyone was upset, because it was thought that every team would be over budget in the following season since the penalty is just so small. But Red Bull's Christian Horner, the team principal for the team, has announced something really shocking that could change the entire outcome of the 2023 Formula 1 season. At the 2022 Mexican Grand Prix, when the FIA first officially announced what penalties Red Bull was going to face for its illegalities, during a press conference, Horner sounded really scared of what was about to happen. He said that, "I hear people say it's not a severe penalty, but 10% less wind tunnel time and other aerodynamic tools is a draconian penalty. That can cost 0.25 seconds to 0.5 seconds per lap. It will have an impact on our ability to perform on track next year." This is incredibly good news for pretty much everyone except Red Bull fans. What he has declared means that next year, we could be seeing a less dominant Red Bull, alongside some actually interesting races where Max Verstappen doesn't simply dominate from start to finish, but where some overtakes for the lead actually take place. Sadly, it is really unlikely that all of what he said is true. First of all, a 10% reduction in wind tunnel time isn't that big of a deal. Usually, it only matters in the first races of the season, since after those ones, the teams come to understand how the aerodynamics actually work, and are able to produce some really good components even without the wind tunnel. Just look at Mercedes this season and all of the components they created in the second half of the year. They were so good that they made the car go from a bouncy castle in the first rounds to a winning car in the last few ones. And to further confirm the hypothesis that it won't hurt them as much as it should, Mercedes was the one who won the Constructors' Championship in 2021. So they got wind tunnel time reduction and they still managed to win a race, even though there was such a huge gap between 2021 and 22 cars due to the big regulation changes. And we can speculate that during the first few rounds, Red Bull will still be competitive and dominant with the other teams which will still be struggling due to porpoising, since Red Bull had found a way around it a long time ago, and progress doesn't just vanish from one season to the other. Red Bull also has Sergio Perez as a second driver, and after everyone found out what he did in Monte Carlo, which we've already made a video about and you can check it out after this one, he will probably be willing to sacrifice his first few races in order to keep his seat at Red Bull, so the team could use him to learn how to get faster and how to fix aerodynamic issues. Because remember, the penalty only affects the aerodynamics of the car. The engine and the incredibly reliable mechanical parts will surely be kept the same as last year, meaning that RB will have an advantage in the long term over the competitors like Ferrari, which are notoriously unable to finish the season with a low number of components on the car. And since from next year the FIA deemed it legal to use 4 different power units, which is one more than what was allowed this season, and since Red Bull is famous for having power units with a really high durability during the season, they could run their engines at a higher setting, gaining an advantage not only in the corners where the drivers excel, but also on the straights where their top speed could be higher than their opponents. Max Verstappen also has the ability to adapt to his car very well. In situations where his vehicle is uncompetitive, he often finds a way to compensate and still perform incredibly well, like he did in most races in 2021 since he wanted to win the championship so bad. Some teams like Mercedes will surely get better in 2023, since they get a lot more time analysing the aerodynamics of their car than Red Bull in 2023. Red Bull will only have 63% of Mercedes wind tunnel time for 2023. But still, if they get such an advantage, it will surely not change the way that the car will be produced. Mercedes has to pretty much start over in 2023 in terms of car philosophy, since they got it completely wrong this season, and they don't have anything excellent to start with, unlike Red Bull, which has such a rocket that they could simply change out some components on their 2022 car for next season and call it a day. And trust me when I say that, it will probably be faster than next year's Ferrari car. But during that same interview in Mexico, Horner also said some other things that don't really add up. Maybe he did that to be overdramatic, like we all know he is. But still, in many cases, he obviously lied. First of all, he said, "I stand by the statement that there was zero benefit. Not one penny of the overspend was spent on the performance of the car." This could be true as well as it could be false, but it doesn't seem like something reasonable. In fact, we've seen Red Bull struggle in 2021 to keep up with Mercedes, and having something more in car development surely could have helped them. So I feel like they kept bringing upgrades to the racetrack until last year, and these upgrades don't come cheap. So he's probably lying. Also because in 2021, there weren't more races than what there usually is. So they could know what to expect in terms of budget to move their cars around the world for a whole season, and overspending there seems like something pretty dumb. Then he said something blatantly wrong. He said, "Did we see any on-track performance? No, we didn't. Are there any things that we could do better from an accounting perspective? Of course. There are lessons that could have been learned, but not just on our side. I think on all sides." This isn't really right. We saw on-track performance benefits in 2021, since Red Bull got a lot better from 2020 to 2021. And if he's referring to the fact that Red Bull didn't have a better car than Mercedes, this is also wrong. Mercedes had their car, the W12, pretty much identical to the car they had the previous year, the W11, which was incredibly fast, not only because of the dual-axis steering, but also thanks to the aerodynamics they had and how well it was engineered. Since in 2020, Red Bull and Mercedes were really far away in terms of car performance, Red Bull surely saw an on-track advantage. They ended the season with both cars pretty much on the same level, which was a huge step up from the year before. Then, Horner goes on to blame their accountant for making it seem like they went over budget, even though they actually did go over budget. They didn't go over by $2 million, which is what it looked like, but only by $500,000. And the number seemed so high due to a tax credit problem they had while making the list of all their spendings in 2021 to send to the FIA. Yes, that's true, but don't forget that they did really go over the budget. Man, I wish things were simpler. Imagine how cool the sport would be if everybody just followed the rules carefully instead of trying to find any legal loophole they could. Then it would actually be fun watching all the races on TV instead of having the current winning team under attack from every Formula 1 fan in existence. Well, I really hope the penalty for Red Bull does its job and gets us the show that we deserve. Let us know with a comment below what you think of this situation, and don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Bye for now.